Hello, welcome to this week's BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe Coming. I'm John Rawl with the publisher of GoJackets.com, Jonathan Leifheit. Halloween is this week, and we've got good news. If you want to go out and trick or treat, it's good to show the Georgia Tech colors this Halloween because the Jackets are victorious once again after downing Wake Forest. Jonathan, how about those Jackets?
Well, that was great second half. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first half as well, which wasn't quite as great as the second half. But in reference to Halloween, you mentioned it's kind of good that we have kind of get to go see the big orange folks up there for Halloween.
Scary. Which,
by the way, traditionally we've done messed up their season a few times on Halloween. One of my favorite games of all time was the Great Pumpkin Game of 2000, where I don't know if most people have seen it on GoJackets.com because I post it every year. Two guys wore pumpkin heads to the game, and there was nothing quite as amusing as pictures of sad pumpkins on the front of the paper the next day.
Don't tell me they had the orange overalls on either.
No, they did not.
Both.
Okay. They did not have the orange overalls on, but they did in fact have the pumpkins on their head.
All right, we'll talk about Clemson. We'll go back and look at the Wake Forest win. We've got an exciting show from Buffalo's Cafe. Stay with us. And welcome back to Buffalo's Cafe Coming, and this is the place to come watch Georgia Tech versus Clemson if you're not able to go to Death Valley this weekend. With 14 metro locations, Buffalo Cafe is the place to wear the white and gold and support the Jackets. And right here in Cumming, we are the West Lanier Network spot for you to catch Georgia Tech. So come early, grab you a spot, check out all the TVs, 27 televisions, in fact, here at Buffalo's Cafe Coming. Not a bad set to watch the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets whip up on the Clemson Tigers. Well, Jonathan, we're going to go back now. I'm John Rawl with Jonathan Leifheit at GoJackets.com. 38-24, Georgia Tech wins over Wake Forest. A score that wasn't quite as much of a blowout until the final seconds when the Jackets got a insurance run.
Yes, it was. And to be perfectly honest, that we got a victory was very, very, very awesome given how things were looking at the half, which was
scary, speaking of Halloween.
Yes, very scary. And, those guys at Wake Forest were dressed in all black, and they were looking kind of like the Grim Reapers for us coming into this week. So they jumped out and really did a nice job of dominating the Jackets in the first half, forced a couple of field goal attempts. Jackets had, first and goal. Actually, I think first and goal twice on the same series due to penalties and couldn't cash in, ended up having to kick a field goal. Wake Forest did a good job in the first half of kind of limiting things, and their offense did fantastic in terms of converting their opportunities. They jump out to a 21-13 lead, and I will tell you that lead could have easily been 21-10. The Jackets were a fortunate recipient of a late late hit out of bounds on the Demon Deacons that put the Jackets in field goal range. So they go to the half up down 21-13 and looking all the world like they were going to be beaten because Wake Forest was coming out there with the ball to start the second half.
Well, let's give Wake a lot of credit. They are a much improved Wake Forest team, a team that going into this game against the Jackets could have easily been undefeated. I mean, they should have beaten Florida State, and their other, Clemson, I guess, got out of hand, but they still were competitive with Clemson for a good part of that game.
I would agree. They probably should have beaten and could have beaten Florida State. Florida State took a very late touchdown to convert for them to actually win that game. So from my perspective, most people look at Wake and go, well, it's Wake. This is a little better. This is kind of, I said this last week, everybody looks at Duke and they go, it's Duke. Well, and Duke's a lot better than they used to be.
Well, maybe not this year. Didn't they lose to Pittsburgh over the weekend?
Yeah, good point. Good point. But Wake is better. They're not going to try and pull in the wool over anybody's eyes and tell you they're a top top 10 team or even a top 25 team, but they are certainly a capable team.
But they obviously were quite good under Jim Grove during those 1 or 2 years, didn't they? They beat Georgia Tech for the conference championship.
2006.
So not saying they're that good, but they are better than they have been since that time right now.
I would agree with that.
Of course you're going to agree.
Yeah, because you're right.
Because I'm right beside you.
Yes.
But anyway, no, I'm teasing. This was a better Wake Forest team. It was a tough environment. It's homecoming. We're going to talk about what all Mr. Leifheit and his crew did later in the show for homecoming and the special weekend that brings to Georgia Tech alums and coming back to the alma mater and such. But let's kind of break this game into two halves. It was really the tale of two halves. The first half was Halloween ugly and scary.
Yep, as I mentioned, Georgia Tech, gets jumped out on and trails 21-13, and it's looking all the world like this is going to be a bad day as Wake Forest, was going to get the ball back, and Tech had shown no compunction to stop them, the latter part of the first half. Teams only had 4 possessions each. Wake Forest scores on 3 of those 4. The only ones they didn't was the opening possession. So they've got 3 straight possessions going into the half where they've scored a touchdown. That was a little bit scary because, as I mentioned, they were supposed to get the ball to receive on the second half. They come out basically in the second half, the first possession, and Tech plays a little better on the first play, but then kind of this is when the game changed for the Jackets.
Yeah.
Their quarterback is looking around, setting the offense and doing whatever, and suddenly their center snaps the ball right over his head, and he's not even paying attention to the fact that the center snaps the ball. They end up recovering the ball on about their 3 or 4 yard line, and that pretty much at that point the wheels came off for Wake Forest on offense. They weren't able to do much more. They did manage 1 field goal the entire half. Hats off to the Georgia Tech defense. They started filling lanes and doing things they needed to do against that read option.
Early, or you're saying after these adjustments?
After these adjustments. After the half, it was a different team. So the defense stepped up, held them to 3 points in the second half, and the offense finally got things rolling. Kervonte Benson up the middle, and then TaQuon Marshall and also Quay Searcy on the outside. I think they had Benson basically he was at 5 yards a pop the whole day, and then the home run hits came from 2 from Marshall. I think it was a 49 and a 70-yard run. Yeah. And then we also had Quay Searcy added a 42-yard touchdown run on top of that, where he just basically split the defense. Didn't really get that great of blocking, but it was a great individual effort. Split the defense, ran right between a couple guys and got himself into the end zone. So kind of an inside-outside kind of a second half. The Jackets then end up rolling up well north of 400 yards rushing, I believe it was. So another stat stuffer day in terms of the offense. And the defense played fantastic that second half. I think they allowed 362 yards of offense, and I believe well over half of that came in the first half. I think they only allowed probably, I think it was 140 yards in the second half, but my math might be wrong on that.
Okay. Well, we talked about a tale of two halves, and obviously we saw offensively the Jackets were kind of restricted in the first half. The defense let Wake get more points than they should. Let's talk about the offensive line, because anybody that knows anything about football says it all comes down to the trenches. Were you okay with what happened with Georgia Tech offensively in the trenches in the first half?
No, I wasn't. So a couple things. First off, the Jackets actually leading up to the game, Paul Johnson actually made a comment and everybody's going to kind of go, what? That he needed his team to throw the ball more. They wanted to throw the ball more. So they actually threw the ball 9 times in the first half, which is normally a game's worth of throwing. Mm-hmm. And let's just be very blunt about it. Jahazel Lee just got owned by the defensive lineman for Wake, and his name is escaping me, but I expect him to have his name called on the first round next year in the NFL draft. So they were able to sack Marshall 3 times in the first half. That really kind of deflated all the drives and whatnot and how they were playing. So I wasn't real happy with that. On top of that, up the middle where Kervonte Benson kind of makes hay was not there as much, and then they were also kind of shutting things down on the outside. Particularly, Georgia Tech was able to drive 20-20. Once they got inside the 20s or down closer to field goal range, things were kind of really getting shut down. So Wake did a good job of kind of bending but not breaking, and then given the field goal woes that Georgia Tech has, they went for it a couple times on fourth and much longer than you'd like, and then also had to kick. They did manage to kick 2 field goals out of that as well.
Okay. So the adjustments again at halftime, I would love to be a fly on the wall and know what exactly was said, not just to the players, but it sounds like Coach Johnson had a little QT with some of his assistant coaches.
I would think so, and I will tell you from a defensive perspective, to me, when I watched the game, the place that stood out most was the linebacker play. Wake plays this little read option, and when you do that, there are going to be lanes that open up, and you have to know which gaps to fill. And Bruce Jordan Swilling and Victor Alexander seem to pick the wrong ones every single time. In the second half, I noticed that they were lined up probably a little closer to the center, and they actually started filling the right gaps. And guess what? They got some tackles, got some stops, and then also I think that also helped. Brentavious Glanton played a fantastic second half as a defensive tackle. Add those 3 things up, and that was able to kind of limit what Wake was able to do in the second half.
All right, well, we've talked a little bit about first half action. We're going to expound on what happened in the second half when we come back from this break, and what a second half it was. And we mentioned a little bit about Marshall and the great run he had, 70 yards. Looked like a speedster, a big speedster heading down that sideline, getting that touchdown, and it was such a beautiful thing to propel the Jackets to a win. We'll have more on that and more on this week's BuzzLine. Stay with us. Looking okay over there? Okay. They're on steroids. Hello, friends. Welcome back to BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe, Cumming, Georgia. If you want to come out and see us, we do the show each and every Sunday at Buffalo's Cafe. We're located at 1175 Buford Highway in Cumming, and that is just off of Georgia 400, exit 14. Head toward Buford, and we will be on your left. So we encourage you to come and check us out and enjoy the great food that is offered here. This is a Georgia Tech friendly place. I'm John Rawl with Jonathan Leifheit, GoJackets.com. And, Jonathan, those directions were good for you from where you're coming from, East Cobb, right?
Absolutely. That's right up 400. Take Highway 20 to the right.
Hoping you would share a shortcut with our audience.
Well, it depends on where they're coming from. I can't shortcut them from East Cobb if they're coming from, I don't know, say Gwinnett.
I thought there might be, with all the construction going on, it seems like there would be a straight shot from coming to any place in all of Georgia, frankly. There seems to be a constant construction if you live in Metro Atlanta.
Well, that's just life in the Metro.
Okay. Well, I wish we'd go back to horse and buggies, frankly. It'd be a little bit easier.
Do you have an investment in a horse and buggy?
No, but I'll get one soon. I'll get one soon. I would be probably a smart guy if I could figure that out. Anyway, Buffalo's has locations all over Metro Atlanta. Whether you show up in a car, truck, or a horse and buggy, they'll be happy to accommodate you. I'm not sure if you can legally go in a horse and buggy, though, to a Buffalo.
Hey, the Amish do that. They can get away with it.
I haven't seen any here at this location, but they might be around. All right, Jonathan, we are going to talk now about the 21st century, specifically 2017 and not back in the 19th century. Georgia Tech gets the big win over Wake Forest, comeback win, 38-24, in a beautiful homecoming atmosphere. The lights were on, which is not often in Georgia Tech world that you have evening games.
Well, not lately anyhow.
No.
It used to be much more regular. The last time that we had a night game before this one was actually the famous Miracle on Techwood, where Mr. Lance Austin returned the blocked kick for the win against the Florida State Seminoles.
Well, when is the last time Tech had a home game at night on a Saturday?
Well, that would have been it.
That was a Saturday? Are you sure?
Yeah, it was a Saturday. I am sure of that.
Okay. I thought you'd have to go way back to when they beat Virginia Tech that time.
No. We've had there's been a few here and there, and that was the last one on a Saturday night that we had. there's obviously the Thursday nights, but those don't count. But
no,
I believe
right.
before that, I couldn't tell you when it was, but I do know that was the last Saturday night game.
All right. Well, that was a big win. That was the only highlight, by the way, of the 2015.
That was the highlight of 2015. That play was the highlight of that year.
Which sometimes people have a whole season don't have any highlights, but
that would be 1994, John.
Okay, 94. You sound like you got that one memorized, even though you've deleted all the excitement because there was no excitement.
I just drank my way through that season.
So let's talk now a little bit more about the adjustments made. What do you think if you're the head of Paul Johnson? What do you tell people at halftime?
Well, probably he was doing a lot. I noticed from a defensive perspective. I saw some replays on the big screen that I was kind of paying attention to, and I could actually read his lips. He was kind of that irate about. And he was making comments to this thing about you got to line up correctly. You got to get alignment correctly. So I think the biggest thing that they talked about at halftime on the defensive side was lining up correctly. So I mentioned that in the previous.
This is all 11 positions.
Well, yes, it's all 11. But if you have if the linebacker lines up on kind of over the between the defensive tackle and defensive end instead of over the tackle, well, guess what? He's a half a step out, and those lanes start to open up. Maybe it allows an offensive lineman to get a hat on him and block him. And that's what was happening is they were taking the wrong gaps. Well, when you're not lined up on the right gap, you're likely to take the wrong gap. So that was the first thing, was to get alignment a little better. Get your defensive linemen who are, should they be in the 0 technique, the 1 technique, the 3, whatever, which is basically a gap between, where the offensive linemen are lined up. I also can tell you that in the first half, the defensive backs, they were playing soft coverage. Mm-hmm. The second half, they almost exclusively started pressing the Wake Forest wide receivers. So they went from a cushion where there was a lot of room to pushing to a lot more of press coverage where they were lined up like man on man right on top of those guys. So a lot of little things like that they decided to change up at halftime, and it clearly worked out and paid off for them. Now on the offensive side, I think the biggest thing is if you can't pass block, don't pass. And that's what happened is the drives were getting killed. They dropped back to pass, and number 54 for I think is who it was. 14 for Wake Forest. He was in TaQuon Marshall's grill every time he dropped back to pass. So what you do is you find a way to kind of use that aggressiveness against the guys. Possible, it would not surprise me that if Coach Johnson didn't do some things to kind of, quote, set up some things for later in the game. I can tell you for a fact, having talked to Coach Ralph Region, they would do that a lot. But I think Coach Johnson has a slightly different approach to that in that he kind of looks at what's there and counters it either immediately or he files that away for use later in the game. Okay. As an example, something he did that, he countered. We hadn't seen it all season, but I've been waiting for it. Wake Forest was kind of following the motion very, very heavily in the first half. So when an A-back starts to swing back, you'll see how they start to move in motion. Wake was going heavily against that. So what they did was they began running counter options, which basically means that he goes in one direction and then they swing the play back. And that means all the flow is going to the other side, and now you come back around to the play side. A lot more freedom there. And then he also set them up with a reverse to Ricky June for 30 yards. So he did some things. He saw some things that he saw in the first half. Probably got to talk to his assistants and confirm, make sure that that's what it was. And then in the second half, they countered that. They countered what Wake was doing, and that made a big difference. And that's how TaQuon Marshall was able to run for those 2 long touchdowns that were on counter plays largely. Okay.
We're going to talk more about Marshall's performance. We'll even hear post-game audio courtesy of GoJackets.com of what the Marshall plan did. And we'll also hear from Paul Johnson when we come back from this break and hear his discussion with the GoJackets.coms of the world, and Rod McKenzie was there. But it was a great comeback win, a game that Georgia Tech desperately needed.
I would agree with that. I mean, you look at the schedule, and it is a brutal schedule down the stretch. If you want to go to a bowl game, this is a game you got to win. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You can get there, but you would have a whole lot bigger hill to climb. But this is a team that's not interested in going back out to El Paso. This team wants to go back to good bowl games. And I think that after what we saw this past weekend, this team's still got a lot to play for, and we'll tell you about it as we continue on with more BuzzLine from CRM Sports.
Defense with the read option in the first half. What adjustments did you make in the second?
We couldn't get lined up.
Well, that's scary.
Okay. Johnson. Well, it was a heck of a football game. It was a heck of a football. It was a pretty good play for us. It was a pretty good play for us. It was a pretty good play for us. Close all.
Back we are at Buffalo's Cafe coming. I'm John Rawl with Jonathan Leifheit, GoJackets.com, home of The Hive. It's written right here on his shirt. The Hive, GoJackets.com, the place to go to if you like Georgia Tech. Give me some kind of mathematical fancy term, a percentage.
Well, if you like them 100% or if you like them 20%,
that's
still the greatest place.
I could have come up with that. I thought there was some kind of term out there for a very small fraction of a fraction of a fraction.
Infinitesimal.
There you go. If you like them an infinitesimal amount, GoJackets.com.
Or more.
Or more. Yeah. We want people that like them more than infinitesimal. But anyway, infinitesimal sounds like something that when a kid's born, an infant. Okay.
I can tell you're a marketing major.
I am not a marketing major. I am a
history major.
Business major.
Business major.
I took the M train.
Oh, okay.
All right, we're talking Tech football. Jackets win over Wake Forest. Comeback second half. We will hear from the man that had the 70-yard run late in the game to secure the victory, TaQuon Marshall. But right now we're going to hear from the man that leads the Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket football program, Paul Johnson. And GoJackets.com's Rod McKenzie was able to catch up with the coach in the locker room following the win. Let's go in and hear that right now on BuzzLine from CRM Sports.
It was a heck of a football game. I was really proud of our guys in the second half. I think Wake Forest is a good team. They've played everybody close all year. They're really good on defense inside. And, to come out in the second half, the defense did a nice job holding them to 3 points and got some fourth down stops. And on offense, we were able to hit some big plays and get in the end zone. And, at times we can make it look scary with special teams but bottom line is 38's more than 24, and you take it and move on. I thought that we found some things in the second half that we were able to do a little better with some counter stuff. on offense, especially with the quarterback counter. He hit him for 2 long plays there, and made just enough plays to win.
Okay. Questions for Coach Johnson?
Coach, struggled a little bit on defense with the read option in the first half. What adjustments did you make in the second?
We couldn't get lined up. I mean, we couldn't get lined up, and we had a couple guys out, but that's no excuse. In the second half, we did a little better getting lined up. We just talked about at halftime. I don't care what defense we play. I just wanted to be able to line up, and we did that. Some guys made some plays defensively in the second half.
It seemed like you got TaQuon loose in the second half.
Yeah, they were chasing the motion, and he got loose on a couple of little quarterback counters, and he's really quick and elusive, and they had no backside fold player because they were running with the motion. So, when we did it right, it was a pretty good play for us.
And that was Paul Johnson post-game after the win over Wake Forest. And Rod McKenzie, GoJackets.com, with the first question to the old ball coach.
No, he's not the old ball coach.
O-L-E, I think. I think Spurrier goes O-L.
Yeah, he's not in Spurrier's.
Well, he is an old ball coach. I mean this in an affectionate term.
Okay.
Let's not pick on Steve Spurrier because Georgia Tech was very instrumental in his coaching career.
I would agree with that. He actually, as a result of Bill Curry telling him, we don't need you here, had a pretty big chip on his shoulder when he went to Duke. So, we were pretty instrumental in that. Yeah, I'll agree.
Good question by Rod to ask him about the lining up situation.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I had picked up on the first half the gap filling that wasn't going on, and I think what Coach talks about is getting to the right place in the field, starting in the right place in the field so that you can fill the right gap or get to the right gap, with in time, and that was, I think, the biggest issue that was going on in the first half.
So, we only played a portion of that press conference. Anything else that you may have heard that we need to share with our audience?
I think the other pieces, and we didn't talk about this yet, and we probably need to get to that, is around the point after attempts. Georgia Tech found themselves in a position down 2 with kind of that first touchdown in the second half, and he talks a little bit about chasing the extra points, and I want to talk a little bit about that. We can kind of save that for later, but that was another piece. And other than that, and him talking about how bad special teams was, I don't think there was anything hugely surprising out of it.
Is that something you want to say for later, or can we go ahead and
we can talk about it now?
Pick on them now.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the point after. So I mentioned Georgia Tech went to the half at down 21-13. They hold Wake Forest on the first series and then score. That puts them at a 21-19, and Coach Johnson decides at that point he's going to go for 2 and try and tie it up. And I thought at the time it was too early to start chasing that extra point. So he goes for it. They don't make it, and he mentions bad play call. He took the fall for that.
Yeah.
So then they follow that up with Wake Forest answers with a field goal. Georgia Tech comes back and scores a touchdown. That puts them up 25-24. Had they kicked the extra point previously, now they can kick an extra one, and they would have been up 27-24. Instead, they go for 2 again to try and make up that difference. And guess what happens? They don't make it. Now they're up 25-24, which means that if this game goes back and forth, Wake now can win that with a field goal. So they shot themselves in the foot by going for 2 twice. If they'd have gone for just the 1, they'd have been up the field goal and wouldn't face that situation. Next time they go down the field, they score a touchdown. That puts them now up 31-24, pending the point after attempt. Finally, Coach Johnson says, we're going to go for 1. And then the holder manages to bobble the snap. He gets it down in time, just in time for the kicker to have a very poorly spotted attempt at a thing, and he kicks it right into the Wake Forest line. I don't blame the kicker. I blame the holder on that one. Mm-hmm. So now instead of being up 34-24 with making it a 2-possession game, Georgia Tech is up 31-24, and all Wake Forest has to do is get 1 touchdown to tie it back up again. So they really did themselves no favor by chasing too early in the game, and I put that on Coach Johnson. And then, if they hadn't done that, even if they had blown that extra point, it still would have been 33-24, and it still would have been a 2-possession game instead of a 1.
Tell me how you really feel.
Okay.
Well, I guess they don't teach football engineering at Georgia Tech. Football.
No, that's kind of out of the curriculum.
Okay, well.
But everybody has the so-called chart that says when you're supposed to go for 2 and whatnot. To me, that chart, I've kind of reached the point where I kind of watched people chase the 2 points, and I watched O'Leary do this in years past. And there was I can't remember which game it was that we had that we chased. I think it was against Clemson or somebody where we started chasing the 2 points and it ended up biting us in the butt at the end. We would have won had we not chased the 2-point conversion. Mm-hmm. So to me, kick the 1, keep kicking the 1 all the way through until you have to go for 2. So if you're, I don't think you start looking at that until 10 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. And at that point, then you can start wondering whether or not it's time to go for 2 or not.
I understand. Well, let's talk about something positive, and that would be TaQuon Marshall, who had an unbelievable second half. He finished with 163 yards on 23 carries, had a 49-yard touchdown run earlier, and then capped that off with a 70-yarder with less than 2 minutes on the clock to seal the deal for Georgia Tech.
Yes, so those 2 plays really were, the bulk of what TaQuon did that day. That's, if you look at that, that's 119 yards on 2 plays, and he had 163 total. So did a fantastic job. As we mentioned earlier, it was the counter option plays that he got outside. And to his credit, he has tremendous speed and is able to kind of pull away, and he basically blew right through. There was one guy that was on his tail as he turned the corner. I think it was on the 49-yarder, and he just pulled away from him. So great speed and great will to get to the end zone. So really good job on his part to take advantage of that open field. But he really had nobody other than the one player that he had to outrun. He had no tackles to break and great downfield blocking on both of those.
And in addition to the speed, the ability to go where they ain't. And on that 70-yarder, if you'll look at how he got through the line and then said, well, there's an opening there, I think I'll go that way. And that's what he did and was able to outrun the competition.
In both of those cases, they all flowed hard to the motion side. That left him just enough space to outrun the player or two that were there, turn the corner, and then down the field he went. I believe he got downfield blocks on the 49-yarder. Ricky June was down there, basically hammering the guy right in the end zone. And then on the 70-yarder, Brad Stewart had his guy basically pinned into the end zone. That ought to tell you how well he was blocked. They were blocked.
Somebody put good block, and I never saw the replay when I watched it on television. But someone blocked around the 30-yard line on the 70-yarder. Really good.
And that was probably one of the A-backs.
Okay.
So I'm not sure who it was. I think,
We'll give them all the credit. Great job because
Searcy was down there doing that. And it was probably Searcy or Green that did.
You're not going to have 70-yard touchdown runs if you don't have a lot of people helping them. It's a team game.
It is a team game, absolutely.
And one missed block leads to not a 70-yard touchdown. All right, here is TaQuon Marshall and receiver Ricky June talking after the game with GoJackets.com.
Not really. Coach Johnson always surprises me, but I know I know my numbers going to get called eventually, but I didn't know it was going to be that early in the game.
Were you excited when the reverse got called? And you probably seen the same thing Coach Johnson did.
Oh yeah, during practice he said we're gonna have to run the reverse at least one play because they chase a lot. So that was a good play by Coach.
Rick, on the first Marshall touchdown, you were blocking downfield. Do you get a feel that he's behind you, or?
Well, definitely at home games, and when I hear the crowds like yelling and stuff, I know all right, this kid's he's behind me. I gotta put some pressure on the cornerback.
Seems like most of TaQuon's big runs this year will feature you in front of him blocking, and that's something you obviously take a lot of pride in blocking, but it seems like this season you've taken it up a notch where you're just driving guys 40 yards down the field.
I consider myself a good blocker, and I know once they see me in the front, they know all right, we're about to score a touchdown. So that's good.
Joining us, quarterback TaQuon Marshall.
Quan, could you talk a little bit about the offensive line when Stick went down? You were down to 5 guys. What kind of role did they play in this game, especially with you running behind them?
I have a lot of confidence in them. They all know what to do. We practice it every week. I mean, all the guys get reps. So if somebody goes down, I know the next guy's going to step up, and I have confidence in them that they're going to do their job.
Good stuff there from receiver Ricky June and TaQuon Marshall coming in after the victory over Wake Forest.
Yeah,
Great blocking up front.
I think it just
Guys
reiterates the point I
opened up
made about
some
the
holes
blocking
for me.
downfield
Ricky
that
made great block on the
Ricky
perimeter.
did. I mean,
I
when
just tried to
Ricky
make a play
and
try to
Brad
kinda
block
get the
downfield,
game
or
in our
Jalen
favor.
Camp for that matter, it really opens things up and makes it a lot easier for those guys to score. And in my opinion, Ricky June played, TaQuon Marshall and Kervonte Benson get all the credit for all the yards, but guess what? We had Ricky had that 30-yard reverse. He also had three receptions. He led the team in receptions, and he also was pancaking guys down the field. So he played every bit as good as either Marshall or Benson did, and probably won't get the credit. But in my opinion, he was spot on Saturday night, especially in the second half.
All right, Jonathan Leifheit, the wise words coming from a guy that knows Georgia Tech sports. We'll take a break here on BuzzLine, and we'll turn our attention to the Clemson Tigers, a team that is coming off a bye week as they get ready to face the Jackets. So we'll have information on that as we roll on with more of this week's show. Hello, welcome back to BuzzLine. We're at Buffalo's Cafe where you can find chicken, burgers, they've got wraps, they've got pizzas, so much right here. The whole family is welcome to come to Buffalo's Cafe. We happen to be at the Cumming, Georgia location, which is just off of Georgia 400, 1175 Buford Highway is the address. And they have a wonderful wait staff here. And Allie's taking care of us this week. She's back in the saddle. And all the other folks from Austin to Bailey to who am I leaving out? Lots of them here, and they want to see you here at Buffalo's Cafe. The Jackets get the victory over Wake Forest, a much-needed win, a win that propels Georgia Tech to 4-2 on the season, 3-1 in ACC play. And now they face off against a team that also has a one-loss conference record, the Clemson Tigers.
Yeah, and I think if there's two things you don't want to see in terms of facing Clemson, one of them is I don't really want to see them coming in off an off week and having them being nice and healthy. And the second thing is I don't want to see them coming off of a loss where they're going to be really angry. So Georgia Tech's going to face a monumental challenge. Oh, and the third thing I really wouldn't want to see if I were facing Clemson is to play them in a night game at Death Valley. So Georgia Tech has three factors that are going to be heavily against them, and this is going to be an uphill battle. Now,
but you'll be there.
Oh, absolutely.
And you'll console them.
No, the Tigers, yes. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is
consult Georgia Tech.
Yeah. I'm not going to consult the Georgia Tech because they don't want my expertise on that in that regard. But in my opinion, Georgia Tech absolutely can play with Clemson, and they've proven that. They've had their kind of issues with Clemson the last couple of years, but I think largely going to depend kind of on if Clemson, how healthy they are. In particular, their quarterback that they have, Kelly Bryant. He went out with a pretty nasty concussion against Syracuse, and when I say nasty, I mean to the point where he was out cold for a bit and wobbling around. So normally, when you get a concussion of that magnitude, you're not back in 2 weeks. So we'll see if he's back.
That's not been announced, his playing.
Well, we won't know that until Thursday. Typically, none of the teams release their injury reports till Thursday. So we'll see how that goes. But I will be surprised to see him, which obviously will play better for Georgia Tech because I'm not convinced that they have a quarterback that's of his caliber behind him. They've got some talented individuals, but I'm not sure they have one of his caliber behind him. So we'll see kind of how that goes. But this is going to be – there's a lot of things that Tech has got to do right to play. They got to play their best game of the season to hang with the Tigers and hope that some of the breaks go their way. So when Clemson's faced with 4th and 10, let's hope that they don't bobble the ball around, bounce it off their face mask, and then still catch it. Instead, maybe it'll drop to the ground this time.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. Now, of course, Georgia Tech, not getting too crafty with the mascot, but they have been a real pest to Clemson historically. Maybe not in the last 2 years, but no other team has given Clemson as many fits as Georgia Tech has.
No doubt. And if you look at the series record, I believe Tech is close to a 2-1, maybe 1.5. I think they won by far more than they've lost to Clemson, and it's not even close. Now the Clemson people will tell you, well, that's because we always used to come to Atlanta. Nonetheless, I'm just stating the facts. Tech has beat them, and it's also been we've beaten them when they have been heavily ranked. I alluded to the 2000 game earlier. I believe they were number 5 in that game. They came to Bobby Dodd Stadium in 2011, ranked number 3 in the country.
Yeah,
walked away with a loss. So there have been some times Tech has done a good job of kind of playing them. And I will tell you that the Jackets absolutely respect Clemson, but they sure don't fear them, and that's absolutely the way it should be.
Wasn't there a big Calvin Johnson victory in Death Valley one time?
2004. That was actually kind of Calvin's coming out party. He had 3 touchdowns, and that was the game where Clemson rolled the ball back to their punter. He couldn't field the punt. Tech takes over on downs and throws a touchdown with like 11 seconds left. It was a game Tech had no business winning and won it anyway. So, occasionally we talked about the ball not bouncing your way. Well, there's a prime example of when the ball did bounce Georgia Tech's way and gave them a victory they had no business getting.
All right. Well, other than the quarterback situation that's going on with Clemson, anything else that concerns you coming off their loss since they were humiliated by that?
So, I mean, the other question is this is a Clemson team that prides themselves on their defense, and Syracuse put up 27 and really kind of had their way with them a bit. So from a defensive standpoint, we got to see what, is it the Clemson we saw earlier in the year where they, stuffed Auburn for 6 points? Is it the group that has stonewalled everyone, and then, or is it the group that played against Syracuse? So we kind of got to see. I'm not sure their identity is completely kind of fleshed out yet. I will tell you, Brent Venables has been done a fantastic job against Paul Johnson since he's been there. Gotten progressively better year after year. Last year they held the Jackets to only 7 points. So this is going to be an uphill challenge, and Coach Johnson's got to find some things to counter some of the stuff that Venables is going to throw at the Jackets.
Speaking of assistants for Clemson, their longtime offensive coordinator, when Dabo first got going, is it Steele or Gilbride or somebody like that? Anyway, he left Clemson just a few years ago and went to SMU. And SMU's having a good time at football this year.
Oh, Chad Morris.
That's it.
Yeah, you're thinking Steele. Kevin Steele was their defensive coordinator at one point as well. I'm not sure where he's at, but Venables is the guy now. And I think Billy Napier, or I'm not sure who their offensive coordinator is now, but Napier was part of that kind of group that was calling plays and whatnot. Okay. So I'm not sure who it is now.
I was glad to get rid of Chad Morris out of Clemson, and it took him a year or two. But SMU, watch them; they're a much improved football team, and I think they've got a pretty good season going right now. But anyway, that's the Ponies. We'll talk in Jackets, but I did want to give any SMU fan that might be watching a little love because they've been through a lot out there in Dallas.
Yeah, anytime when you're the only program to survive a death penalty. You've been through it.
All right. Well, we will take a break here, our final break of this week's BuzzLine. Any questions, comments, let us know via the Facebook Live. Or if you want to call us, 803-816-1170 is the magical way to do that. And when we come back, we'll take a scary look around the ACC. And since it's Halloween week, we'll get the ghosts and goblins out of here and tell you what Georgia Tech needs to do to find themselves in a much better position come end of football season. This is BuzzLine. We'll be right back.
That was bad, John.
All right, getting ready to start back here. I want to thank the hearts and sunglasses that we got in from Tammy Simons and Don Rayberg. I guess some of our BuzzLine / GoJackets.com fans.
Yep, and Tammy's a good friend. Saw her Saturday night as well.
Well, Tammy, thank you for the heart jacket. I guess that's a jacket. My eyes are not the world's greatest. Do you see that?
Yeah, it looks like a jacket to me.
Okay, you know, the old emojis of the world, I'm still trying to get through that deal.
Yes, I know you struggle with social media. So
socialist media is what I call it.
Yeah.
But no, it has its purpose. But I'm sorry, this is not a social media issue. This is more of John's eyes issue. I think
you need glasses, don't you?
No, my glasses are good. It's just, I guess either I'm so smart that my eyesight is going down, or I'm getting old.
I'm going with the latter.
Okay. I'm going to punch you right in the face.
There you go.
See, I'm joking again.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of joking, we'll come back and wrap up this show, and that's no joke. And we're back with the final segment of this week's Buzz Line. He is Jonathan Leifheit of GoJackets.com, the home of the Hive Sports Center. And you can join the membership of GoJackets.com. If you're scared to do that, hey, don't be scared. It's the perfect Halloween present. I know, Jonathan, growing up, all I ever wanted for a Halloween present was a membership of GoJackets.com.
Yep, and you could still have one.
I mean, you got Christmas presents, Easter presents. Why not Halloween?
Yeah, sure. And I promise you there will be no razors in your candy from us.
All right, GoJackets.com, part of the CBS Sports Interactive family. Check it out. Got a lot of stuff going on with this week's game with the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets and the Clemson Tigers. It's going to be a nighttime kick when the Jackets roll down out of Death Valley.
It will be 8 p.m. I believe it's what they call the reverse mirror broadcast. So the Jackets will be probably in the Southeast, will be on ABC, and nationally they will be on ESPN2.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, because I don't understand reverse mirrors. So the Jackets head up there.
Are you some kind of vampire?
I am. I'm definitely. You got me. What can I say? Okay. Well, so let's look at before we get out of here this week. Some crazy, spooky stuff happened to some of our ACC brethren over this past weekend, with Pittsburgh picking up a rare victory.
Yeah, Pittsburgh rolled into Raleigh. Where are they at? Durham. Thank you. Into Durham, and snuck out of there with, I think it was a 24-17 victory. So congrats to them. I really didn't see them doing it. I thought they would. Them and North Carolina would be fighting it out for the cellar of
the Ophir
of the Coastal. And instead, they've now pulled Duke into that mix. So as far as I'm concerned, good job, Pitt. So that was a mild surprise to me. Anytime, Duke loses, it's not a complete surprise.
But to Pitt, which has had a horrible year thus far.
Yep.
Of course, Louisville beat Florida State. Not the biggest surprise with all the problems FSU's having.
But I tell you, I watched that game pretty much start to finish. One thing I will say is Jackson, their quarterback,
happens to be the reigning Heisman Trophy winner.
Yeah, and you know what? He may not get it this year because of the record of his team, but I will tell you, he's a one-man show for those guys, and they would be, in my opinion, they would probably be on par with Pitt, North Carolina, and Duke in terms of how good they are if they didn't have him. Holy cow, he is one talented individual.
Another surprise this past weekend, the Virginia Cavaliers lost. They had been really one of these surprise teams thus far.
Yeah, they they kind of had kind of shaken themselves from being the Cadavaliers instead of and back to the Cavaliers, and then Boston College walked into Charlottesville and absolutely ran up and down their throats. I mean, they just ran it all over the place. And I believe the final on that was, last time I checked, it was 41-10. I don't know what the final was, but all I can tell you is Boston College beat the living snot out of the Cavaliers.
Yeah. So they, of course, Virginia's still left on the schedule, and you've got teams coming up like Duke. Two of these crazy losses are upcoming opponents for Georgia Tech, so going to be a good one.
Yeah, you look at the remaining schedule for the Jackets, and they've got in terms of teams, they got Duke, who's at 1-4, and I'm talking about the conference schedule. Virginia is at 2-1, but did not look so good against Boston College. Virginia Tech also at 2-1 as well. So somewhere in there, we got to find a way to make Miami lose. I'm not sure who that on the schedule is capable of that. Probably Virginia Tech, and then we got to find a way to make Miami lose again.
Yeah, well,
so,
Syracuse did their part to try to pull off the upset, but it just came up a little short.
Yeah, it kind of had that feeling that whole day that Miami was it was a better team than Syracuse.
Right.
Syracuse would fought valiantly, but they just didn't quite have the horses to get in there.
All right. Well, again, it's Clemson and Georgia Tech. It's an 8 o'clock kick. And if you can't be there in person, make sure you log on to GoJackets.com for all of the insight leading up to kickoff, during the game, and, of course, the post-game reaction. And we'll be back right here on BuzzLine on next week's show to break it all down and get you ready for the next opponent, which is Virginia, right?
Yeah, following Clemson, it's Virginia.
On the road.
Yep, Virginia on the road, Virginia Tech at home, Duke on the road, and then the hated mutts of Georgia at home.
Yep. So all of that coming up for Georgia Tech fans. But so far, other than 2 points, this has been a perfect season for Georgia Tech.
Yeah, they have trailed for 4 seconds of the second half in their whole season.
Man, that is amazing. All right, well, we'll be back here. I want to thank everybody for tuning us in. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, if you're one of our affiliates, or on GoJackets.com, thank you for listening to us. I'm John Rawl with Jonathan Leifheit, thanking you once again. And thanks again to Buffalo's Cafe, Cumming, Georgia. Come on out anytime and enjoy this great Georgia Tech place. And the watch party going on here Saturday night for the Clemson-Georgia Tech game. Show up, be loud, and pull the Jackets through in Clemson.
And you can yell, "Go Jackets," all night long.
He said it. We'll see you.